The Ghost Army, WW2's Greatest Illusion, March 18, 1945, near Viersen, Germany. The night is cold, moonless, perfect. Along the western bank of the Rhine River, soldiers work in darkness. They're inflating tanks, not building them, not driving them, inflating them, like birthday party balloons shaped like 30-ton killing machines. The rubber squeaks as compressed air hisses through the valves. Within 15 minutes, what looked like a deflated top becomes an M4 Sherman tank, perfect down to the tracks. The shadows, the gun barrel pointing east toward German positions across the river. One soldier steps back, admiring his work. He's 22 years old. Back home, he's an art student. Tonight, he's staging the greatest theatrical performance of the war. His audience? The Wehrmacht. His goal? To make 1 men look like 40,000. If this works, thousands of American soldiers will cross the Rhine tomorrow with minimal casualties. If it fails, if the Germans realize they're being fooled, the artillery shells currently falling on rubber tanks will start falling on real men. This is Operation Viersen, the finale of the Ghost Army's war. But their story doesn't begin here, in this calculated moment of deception. It begins 18 months earlier, with 2 men sitting in an office in London, dreaming up something the American military has never attempted before. Something that will challenge every assumption about how wars are fought. Something that will save between 15,000 and 30,000 American lives. This is the story of how artists became soldiers, how illusion became a weapon, how 100 men armed with nothing but creativity, courage, and inflatable rubber changed the course of World War II. This is the story of the Ghost Army. The Dreamers, January 1944, London, England. 2 men sit across from each other in a cramped military planning office. They couldn't be more different. Colonel Billy Harris, West Point graduate, professional soldier, precise, methodical, the kind of officer who believes problems have solutions if you think hard enough about them. Major Ralph Ingersoll, civilian in uniform, former managing editor of The New Yorker, publisher of Fortune magazine, founder of the newspaper PM, the kind of man who sees possibilities where others see obstacles. They're studying reports from North Africa. In October 1942, British forces fooled Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, the legendary Desert Fox, with an elaborate deception called Operation Bertram. The British disguised tanks as trucks, built dummy supply depots in the wrong locations, made Rommel expect the attack from the south when it came from the north. The deception worked. The British won the Second Battle of El Alamein, turning the tide in North Africa. Harris and Ingersoll asked themselves a question. What if we could do this, but bigger, mobile, repeatable? A traveling roadshow of deception that could follow the front lines across Europe. It's crazy, Harris says. It's brilliant, Ingersoll replies. They draft a proposal, a new type of unit, self-contained. Approximately 100 men, equipped with inflatable vehicles, sound equipment, radio transmitters. Staffed not by combat troops, but by artists, designers, radio operators, sound engineers, creative thinkers who can improvise, adapt, deceive. The brass thinks they're insane, but the D-Day invasion is coming. The Allies need every advantage they can get. On January 20th, 1944, the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops is officially activated at Camp Forest, Tennessee. The Ghost Army is born. The casting call. The recruitment notices are deliberately vague. The Army is looking for men with artistic abilities for a special assignment involving camouflage. What they don't say. This unit will operate near the front lines. It will have minimal defensive weapons. If captured while conducting a deception, the Germans will likely execute them as spies. The men who volunteer come from art schools across America, the Pratt Institute, Cooper Union, the Philadelphia Museum School of Industrial Art. They're painters, sculptors, illustrators. Some are studying architecture, others fashion design. Among them, a 22-year-old from Fort Wayne, Indiana, named Bill Blass. He'll become one of America's most celebrated fashion designers. But in 1944, he's just another private with a talent for drawing and a desire to serve. Another recruit, Ellsworth Kelly, 20 years old, studying at the Pratt Institute. His clean, minimalist aesthetic hasn't yet emerged. That will come later. influenced by what he sees in Europe. For now, he's learning how to paint camouflage that looks good, but not too good. There's Arthur Singer, who will become famous for illustrating the best-selling Birds of North America field guide and create the Birds and Flowers of the 50 States postage stamp series, and Art Kane, future photographer, who will create one of the most iconic images in jazz history, the 1958 Great Day in Harlem photograph. The Ghost Army, it's later said, has one of the highest collective IQs in the Army, an average of 119, but intelligence alone won't save them. They need to be actors, liars, con artists. They need to sell their illusions so convincingly that men with binoculars, reconnaissance aircraft, and intelligence networks believe what they're seeing. Colonel Harry Reeder takes command. He's a career officer, methodical and demanding. He looks at this collection of artists and creative minds and thinks, this is either going to work brilliantly or fail catastrophically. There's no middle ground. The tools of deception. The Ghost Army's arsenal is unlike anything the military has ever assembled. The Visual Deception Arm. 603rd Camouflage Engineers. These are the men who will deploy the inflatable equipment. Each piece is a marvel of engineering designed by Fred Patton at the U.S. Rubber Company in Rhode Island. An inflatable M4 Sherman tank weighs 93 pounds. 2 men can carry it. It takes about 15 minutes to inflate using a portable air compressor. From a quarter-mile away, the distance enemy reconnaissance might observe from, it looks exactly like a real tank. The Ghost Army has inflatable jeeps, trucks, artillery pieces, even liaison planes. In total, they'll eventually field over 600 dummy vehicles. But here's the genius. The camouflage is deliberately imperfect. Not so obvious that the Germans know it's fake, but not so perfect that they can't spot it. The goal is to be seen. Army technicians also work with Bell Laboratories, recording sounds at Fort Knox, Kentucky, tank engines, truck convoys, artillery fire, bridge construction. These recordings are cut onto massive shellac discs, early versions of vinyl records. The Sonic Deception Arm, 31 2-second signal service company. These men operate what they call heaters, 500-pound speakers mounted on half tracks that can project sound up to 15 miles. At night, they'll park these vehicles near enemy lines and blast recordings of tank movements, making the Germans think an armored division is assembling when it's really just sound effects. The Radio Deception Arm, Signal Company Special. These operators create entirely fake radio networks. They mimic the communication patterns of real divisions, the call signs, the encryption patterns, the traffic volume. German intelligence units monitoring radio frequencies will believe they are tracking the movements of entire divisions that do not exist. The Special Effects Arm. These are the improvisers, the method actors. They'll wear fake unit patches, drive trucks with painted-on division insignias, set up phony headquarters with fake generals, hang out in French cafes spinning false stories to anyone who might be a spy. Bill Blass later recalls reading Vogue magazine in his foxhole between operations. It was surreal, he says. We were staging Broadway productions with live ammunition as our reviews. Training is intense. The men learn to set up a fake tank battalion in 4 hours, practice operating at night under blackout conditions, study the organizational structure of real army divisions so they can impersonate them convincingly. By May 1944, they're ready. The Ghost Army ships out to England, arriving just weeks before D-Day. Baptism by fire. June 1944. Normandy, France. The Ghost Army doesn't land on D-Day itself. That would be suicide. They're not combat troops. But they're there soon after. On June 14th, 8 days after the initial invasion, a 17-man platoon from the Ghost Army lands on Omaha Beach. Their mission: create dummy artillery placements to draw German fire away from the real guns. It works. German batteries shell the fake positions while American artillery pounds German defenses relatively unmolested. It's the Ghost Army's first success, but it's also a wake-up call. The dummy positions take fire. Real fire. Shells explode close enough to throw dirt on the inflatable guns, close enough to kill. The men realize they're going to be near the front lines for this entire war. The Germans will shoot at their positions, not knowing they're fake, and eventually the Germans might figure out the deception. If that happens, there will be no mercy. Operation Brest, the biggest show yet. September 1944, Brittany, France. The port city of Brest is under siege. German forces refusing to surrender have holed up in the fortified port. 3 American divisions, the 2nd, 8th, and 29th Infantry, surround the city. But they need to convince the Germans they're facing even more troops than that. Enter the Ghost Army. This is their first operation using all 3 deception methods simultaneously: visual, sonic, and radio. They inflate a fake tank division outside Brest, set up dummy command posts, broadcast fake radio traffic. At night, sonic teams blast recordings of construction equipment, suggesting the Americans are building up for a massive assault. Corporal Jack Macy from Brooklyn later remembers, "Brest was the biggest piece of action I ever saw in World War II. We were right in the thick of it. The deception succeeds. German intelligence reports vastly overestimate American strength. When the real assault comes, German resistance, while fierce, is divided and confused." But the operation is costly. The Ghost Army takes casualties, wounded by German artillery targeting their fake positions. They learn a harsh lesson. Deception has a price. You make yourself a target to protect others. Holding Patton's Line, September 1944, Metz, France. General George Patton's Third Army is attacking the heavily fortified French city of Metz. But Patton's rapid advance has left his flanks exposed. There's a dangerous gap in his defensive line, 23 miles of front with fewer than 800 men to hold it. If the Germans counterattack through this gap, they could cut Patton's supply lines. Disaster. The Ghost Army is ordered to fill the gap, not with real troops, with ghosts. For 8 days, they impersonate an armored division. They set up inflatable tanks along the 23-mile front, broadcast radio traffic suggesting an entire division is deployed, fire occasional artillery rounds to maintain the illusion of activity. German intelligence takes the bait. Their reports describe everything from an armored combat command to several divisions defending the sector. The Germans don't attack. The gap holds. Patton's offensive continues. Later, the official report from the 3rd Cavalry gives credit. The establishment of a simulated armored division during this period by the 23rd Headquarters. Special troops added to the bewilderment of the enemy as to our strength. For 8 days, 1,100 men with rubber tanks and sound effects held a line that should have required 15,000 combat troops. It's one of the Ghost Army's most audacious successes. The artists at War Between Operations, the Ghost Army soldiers sketch, paint, create. They're witnessing history, and they document it the only way they know how, through art. Ellsworth Kelly fills sketchbooks with watercolors of French villages. The compositions are still representational. The hard-edge abstractions he'll become famous for are years away, but you can see his eye developing. The way he reduces buildings to geometric forms, the attention to light and shadow. "We were sleeping in hedgerows and foxholes," remembers Corporal John Jarvie, "but nothing kept us away from going someplace to do a watercolor." Bill Blass sketches fashion designs between missions. He's surrounded by war, but he's thinking about what comes after. In Luxembourg in 1944, lying on his bunk, he drafts the logo that will become his fashion empire's trademark. The soldiers create hundreds of artworks, landscapes, portraits of their buddies, scenes of destruction, images of hope. These aren't propaganda pieces, they're honest attempts to process what they're experiencing. War filtered through the lens of artistic sensibility. Many of these works will be lost or destroyed, but enough survive to give us a window into the Ghost Army's unique perspective. Artists who saw war not just as soldiers but as observers, documentarians, creators. Later, art critic Robert Hughes will note that the Ghost Army's artistic output represents one of the most unusual artistic movements of the 20th century. A group of artists who use their creativity first to deceive and kill, then to document and remember. The Rhine, the final performance, March 1824-1945, Viersen, Germany. The Rhine River is the last natural barrier protecting the German homeland. Once the Allies cross it, the road to Berlin lies open. The U.S. Ninth Army, under General William Simpson, plans to cross near the town of Wessel, but they need the Germans to expect the crossing somewhere else, anywhere else. They call in the Ghost Army for one last show. Operation Viersen is the largest, most complex deception the unit has ever attempted. They will impersonate the entire 30th and 79th Infantry Divisions, approximately 40,000 men, and convince the Germans the Ninth Army will cross the Rhine 10 miles south of the actual crossing point. The Ghost Army deploys every trick they've perfected over the previous year. Visual deception. More than 600 inflatable vehicles, tanks, trucks, artillery, supply dumps, liaison planes, the largest concentration of dummy equipment ever assembled. From the air, it looks like a massive force is gathering near Viersen. Sonic deception. Sound trucks operate around the clock. During the day, construction noises, the clank and grind of engineers building pontoon bridges. At night, the rumble of tanks and trucks moving into position. Real engineer units, attached to the Ghost Army for authenticity, assemble actual bridge sections near Viersen, just enough to make the deception credible. Radio deception. Fake headquarters spring to life on the radio networks. Officers broadcast in the clear, unencrypted, discussing troop movements and logistics. Exactly the kind of careless chatter that German intelligence would expect from an army preparing for a major operation. Special effects. Ghost Army soldiers wear patches from the 30th and 79th Divisions. They hang out in bars in Viersen, drinking and talking loudly about the upcoming crossing. They want German informants to hear them. They want the message to spread. The Americans are crossing near Viersen. For 6 days and nights, the performance continues. German artillery pounds their positions. Shells explode among the inflatable tanks. The Ghost Army soldiers scramble to repair punctured rubber, patching their props like stagehands during intermission. 3 times, direct hits destroy dummy tanks. Each time, the crew drags the deflated hulk away and inflates a replacement. The danger is constant and real. German gunners are trying to destroy what they believe is a legitimate military target. The fact that it's rubber instead of steel doesn't make the shells any less deadly to the men nearby. But the illusion holds. The crossing, March 23rd, 1945, 10 miles north of Viersen. While the Ghost Army stages their elaborate show near Viersen, the real 30th and 79th Infantry Divisions are 10 miles north, preparing to cross the Rhine near Wesel. The Germans have bought the deception completely. A captured German intelligence overlay, seized just before the crossing, shows German commanders believe the 79th Division is exactly where the Ghost Army positioned its fake troops. The 30th Division doesn't appear on the German map at all. They've lost track of it entirely. When the 9th Army attacks, German resistance is disorganized and weak. The divisions cross the Rhine with astonishingly low casualties. The 30th Division's intelligence officer later reports, "The attack came as a complete surprise to the enemy, with a consequent saving of American lives." General Simpson, commander of the 9th Army, sends a commendation to the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops. "Your unit is commended for its outstanding performance." A post-war U.S. Army analysis concludes, "Rarely, if ever, has there been a group of such a few men which had so great an influence on the outcome of a major military campaign." Operation Viersen is the Ghost Army's masterpiece, their final act, and it's perfect. The Secret Keepers. May 8, 1945. Victory in Europe Day. The war in Europe ends. The Ghost Army prepares to return home, but before they leave, they receive orders. Destroy all evidence, burn the inflatable equipment, erase the sonic recordings, seal the records. The Ghost Army gathers their rubber tanks in a field somewhere in France and sets them on fire. The sky fills with black smoke as months of work goes up in flames. Then comes the harder order. Say nothing. Tell no one. Not your families. Not your friends. What you did is classified. What you accomplished must remain secret. Why? The Cold War is beginning. The Soviet Union is the new adversary. If the tactics of the Ghost Army become public knowledge, the Soviets might develop countermeasures. Or worse, replicate the techniques. The men of the Ghost Army return to civilian life carrying a secret. For 50 years they keep it. Bill Blass becomes a fashion icon. dressing celebrities and first ladies. He never mentions his war service. Ellsworth Kelly revolutionizes American art with his hard-edge abstractions. Critics analyze his work endlessly, none connected to his time painting imperfect camouflage for inflatable tanks. Art Kane takes his famous photographs. Arthur Singer illustrates his bird guides. The Ghost Army veterans build successful careers in art, design, advertising, architecture, and they say nothing. Kim Seal remembers his father, Captain Oscar Seal, telling him during the war that he'd transferred from a tank division to serve as a courier. It wasn't until 6 months after his father's death in 2001, when a Ghost Army veteran called about a reunion, that Kim learned the truth. "What do you mean, Ghost Army?" Kim asked. "My dad never talked about it," he said. "He kept the oath." The Unveiling, 1996. After decades of silence, the U.S. military finally declassifies the Ghost Army's records. A few articles appear, then more. But the story doesn't fully emerge until Rick Beyer, a filmmaker and historian, discovers the Ghost Army story and becomes obsessed with telling it. Beyer tracks down surviving veterans. They're in their 80s and 90s now. Some are reluctant to talk. Others are relieved to finally share what they've carried alone for so long. In 2013, Beyer's PBS documentary, The Ghost Army, brings their story to a national audience. The response is overwhelming. People are astonished that such an operation existed, that it worked, that it remained secret for so long. Beyer and the veterans' families begin campaigning for official recognition. The Ghost Army saved thousands of lives. They deserve medals. They deserve to be remembered. But the bureaucracy moves slowly. Years pass. Finally, in February 2022, President Joe Biden signs the Ghost Army Congressional Gold Medal Act into law. The ceremony, March 24, 2024. U.S. Capitol 3 of the 7 known surviving Ghost Army members attend the Congressional Gold Medal ceremony. Seymour Nussenbaum, 100 years old, from Monroe Township, New Jersey. He studied art at the Pratt Institute before being drafted. Bernard Bluestein, 100, from Hoffman Estates, Illinois. He saw the vague recruitment notice on his Cleveland Art College bulletin board in 1943 and enlisted. John Chrisman, 99, from Leesburg, New Jersey. They're the last. The others have passed away. Soon there will be no one left who served in the Ghost Army. The ceremony is emotional. Family members of deceased veterans attend, accepting medals on behalf of fathers and grandfathers who kept their silence until death. Rick Beyer speaks about the unit's accomplishments. 20 major deception operations. Countless lives saved. A contribution to victory that military analysts believe rivals the impact of entire combat divisions. The medal reads, "The United States is eternally grateful to the soldiers of the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops and the 33rd Signal Service Company for their proficient use of innovative tactics throughout World War II, which saved lives and made significant contributions to the defeat of the Axis powers." Nussenbaum, Bluestein, and Chrisman accept the medals. They're frail now, but their eyes are bright. They remember. "It was like putting on a big production," Nussenbaum says. "We've had in some cases people impersonating generals, putting on a general's uniform and walking around the streets." Bluestein reflects on the danger they faced. "If I had known before I got into the service that if the Nazis found out we were playing them for fools, they were likely to retaliate brutally, I probably would have made a different decision." But he didn't know. None of them did. They volunteered. They served. They kept the secret. And now, finally, the secret is out. The legacy, the Ghost Army conducted 21 major deception operations across Europe from June 1944 to May 1945. 3 members were killed. Dozens were wounded. Military estimates credit them with saving between 15,000 and 30,000 American lives. They revolutionized military deception doctrine. Modern military information operations and psychological operations units trace their intellectual lineage to the Ghost Army. The tactics, multimedia, coordinated, mobile, are still taught at military colleges. But perhaps the deepest legacy is this. The Ghost Army proved that creativity is a weapon, that imagination can save lives, that artists, armed with nothing but their minds and their courage, can change the course of history. In an age of guided missiles and satellite surveillance, it seems almost quaint. Rubber tanks fooling German intelligence, sound effects deceiving veteran soldiers, radio operators creating phantom armies. But it worked, because warfare isn't just about firepower. It's about information, perception, psychology. The Ghost Army understood that battles are fought in minds as much as on battlefields. They were soldiers who never fired a shot in anger, artists who created destruction through illusion, liars who told the truest story of all, that survival sometimes requires deception. March 18th, 1945. Near Viersen, Germany, return to opening scene. The soldier steps back from the inflated tank. Around him, 599 other dummy vehicles are taking shape in the darkness. The sonic trucks are warming up. The radio operators are preparing their fake transmissions. In 10 miles north, real soldiers from the 30th and 79th Infantry Divisions are checking their weapons, writing letters home, praying. Those men don't know about the Ghost Army. Don't know that their chances of survival tomorrow depend on how convincing this illusion appears to German observers across the river. The soldier, the art student from New York, looks at his creation one more time. The inflatable Sherman tank sits in the shadows, looking exactly like 30 tons of armor and death. He thinks about his professors back at Pratt. What would they say if they could see this? Art school didn't prepare him for this, but somehow, everything he learned about light and shadow, about perspective and composition, about making people see what you want them to see, has led to this moment. Tomorrow, if this works, thousands of men will survive who otherwise wouldn't have, and no one will ever know. He picks up his air compressor and moves to the next position. There are more tanks to inflate, more illusions to create. The show must go on. The greatest performance of World War II continues, and the audience, deadly serious in their observation, never suspects they're watching theater. That's the genius of the Ghost Army. That's their triumph. They didn't win the war, but they helped ensure that fewer men had to die for victory. And they did it with rubber, sound effects, and imagination. The war ends. The secret is kept. The story remains hidden for 50 years. But truth, like art, endures. The Ghost Army's legacy isn't just in the lives they saved or the battles they influenced. It's in the proof that human creativity, that spark of imagination that lets us see what isn't there and make others see it too, is one of our most powerful weapons. Not for destruction, for preservation. Not for killing, for saving. The artists who became soldiers. The soldiers who remained artists. The Ghost Army. The greatest illusion of World War II. The deadliest magic trick ever performed. The traveling roadshow that helped win a war. And for half a century, the best kept secret in military history.